But obviously all of us are heading in one direction. Some of us will get it there sooner than others, but it is, of course, some form of aged care. Now, Australia has a system where we try to stay in our house for as long as possible, but then sometimes we have to go to somewhere else to be taken care of. This is a very serious, important thing because we all know somebody who's gone through it, is going through it, is about to go through it, or it might be us ourselves. And obviously we've had things like an Aged Care Royal Commission, which have seen so many terrible stories about the way that people are treated in these organisations. Now, of course, I should say before we get too deep into this, many, if not all, of the people who actually are there face to face, the nurses, the carers, all of those people, they are all in and they love the people that we love, okay? But sometimes the companies that are in charge of them, well, they don't seem to share the love that we do, and they also don't seem to share the sense of care that you would think is there when you have to sell your house to pay to go into an aged care facility. It's something that was discussed at the last federal election, and this government claimed that they were going to change the world, first with a nurse in every aged care facility in the country.
24/7 nurses. 24/7 nurses. 24/7. 24/7 nurses. Nurses 24/7. 24/7 nurses. 24/7. Nurse in a nursing home 24/7.
Now that promise has not happened, and there are options where facilities have somehow been able to opt out of that system. So surprise, that promise has not come to full effect. The other one is about the type of food that people have in aged care. Too many reports have told us for too long about the quality of nutrition, or the outright lack of it, that many people in their final years are actually getting from these institutions. So the now Prime Minister made a very obvious promise, and he even had a famous face to help him change the food in aged care.
That the Maggie Beer Foundation would play a role in lifting up the standards, in providing the quality of food which provides the nutritious content that older residents need and that they deserve, frankly.
Well, I hope you're sitting down, because this is how the Australian reported a shocking number today. 4 out of 10 people in nursing homes are malnourished. Not because they are not choosing to eat, but because of the food that in part is put in front of them. The first comprehensive survey of nutrition in aged care undertaken in Australia found that 40% of residents were malnourished, including 6% who were severely malnourished. Severely malnourished means starving. The study, published in the journal Healthcare, said this was likely underplaying the extent of malnutrition. So these numbers are a best-case scenario, 40%. Given that it did not include nursing home residents with dementia because of issues of consent. Other studies have shown that almost 60% of dementia residents in aged care are at risk of malnutrition. This is a disgrace. I do not understand, in the web of complicated rules around who gets to have an aged care facility, who gets to set one up, and the extraordinary fees and charges that mean that one of the reasons why Australians want to buy a home is that one day they will be able to sell the home to pay for things like aged care. You work your whole life to pay the house off, and then you cash in the house to make sure you're as comforted and cared for as long as possible. But to see that there are 40% of people who are in aged care tonight, and that's the low number, that they are malnourished, or in some cases, depending on how severe mental conditions may well end up being, it could be way worse than that. This is a disgrace. It is a disgrace that this was not the lead news story today. It is a disgrace that it will not be on a front page anywhere tomorrow. It is a disgrace that the Prime Minister is able to give a press conference today and nobody asks about it. It is a disgrace that when the Prime Minister plans to reshuffle, there will be no conversation about changing the aged care minister. This is not acceptable. Now, I don't care what numbers the government will put out to say, well, this is slightly better than it used to be, it's unacceptable. It's not on. It's not okay. It's despicable. Now, if people choose not to eat the meal in front of them, that's their right. But if the meal in front of them is not good enough to give them the nutrients to be able to stay alive or to have a better quality of life while you can have that quality of life, this is a red line. This is an absolute scandal. I do not understand how we do not have a system that inspects these homes, that they are put on the shortest leash possible, that if their people inside them are malnourished, that they are able to continue on with their businesses. It is not acceptable. The organisations must be fined. The organisations must be shut down. Now, there is an awful lot of money in aged care, which means there will always be somebody else that will open up a new facility. But this is not acceptable. Now, we in this country are generous with the tax that we pay to our government because we know that there are people that are less fortunate than us. That's why we have a thing called the social safety net. And it doesn't matter where you sit on the spectrum, from the right to the left or anywhere else in between. We all believe that when somebody is in the darkest days of their life, that something should be able to help them to get back into the system, to be able to go and work and provide for themselves and for their families. When it comes to things like disabilities that sometimes mean that the type of work you can do is limited, we are completely okay with a system where substantial amounts of federal funding go to make sure that that person has a quality of life. As a taxpayer, I have no problem with state or federal government money being spent in the aged care facilities to make sure that the people in them are taken care of. And if we need to double the amount of money to make sure that the food is up to standard, fine by me. And let's not pretend that this government doesn't have the money to fix this problem tomorrow. Because, of course, as we've shown you, the Prime Minister is going to spend $400 million, in fact, $450 million, on not one but two brand new planes for himself and his mate, the Governor-General. Oh, but those were ordered by the previous government. Well, they weren't cancelled by this one. That's what they spent $450 on. Let me get you to close to $1 billion. There was a referendum. It cost how much? $450 million. All right, now we're at $900 million. That could be spent right now to make sure that the 40% of people who are malnourished in aged care will not be so into the future. The government is going to spend $600 million helping to set up a rugby league team in Papua New Guinea. And on top of all of that, their Future Made in Australia plans, all the rest of it, that's $22 and a bit billion, which is swirling around, and a lot of people are clipping the ticket along the way. My point is this: not every single dollar that the government gets can be spent on the one thing that we would all love it to be spent on. So yes, it must be spread. But in the same way that they can put off budget $304 billion for the submarines, which are important for us to be there when it comes to AUKUS, perhaps off budget is where they can put the money so they don't have to worry about it affecting the surplus. It's all borrowed money anyway, to make sure that the people who have made this country what it is, and I mean that, the people who have made this country what it is, and you can interpret that in any way, shape or form. The people who were born here, the people who've come here, the people who have worked their backsides off, the people who have been parents, the people who have cared for other people's children, the people who have worked in the emergency services, the people who may well have themselves at another point in time been nurses in things like aged care facilities. When they go into an aged care facility, the food's got to be up to standard. And it's all well and good for the Prime Minister to stand there again and say, well, we've got, this famous chef and her foundation and they're going to improve it. Well, guess what? He's been around for 2 years and it's not good enough. What is equally not good enough is this story in a day of big news. that this is probably the first time you're hearing about it. Every family in Australia, regardless of your political affiliation, has an interest in this system being fixed, doing better. It's a scandal that 4 out of 10 people in aged care are malnourished. It's a disgrace. I call on the opposition to make this the political issue that it should be. I call on the government to respond to it as fast as possible. And I call on the people with access to a television camera, a microphone, or a computer to write an article to talk about it.